Well, I went to see Mr. Thorp because in 1990 my father passed away, and hadn't really used my experience of using a solicitor in Alnwick there wasn't any experience of it, so I thought, well, I'll just go and choose somebody, and we chose Mr. Thorp, and so I went to see him, and it was really it was like going back in time, going into that place. There was just papers all over the place, lots of dark wood, seemed like organised chaos, and it was sort of like, I would imagine, walking back into the 1930s. And yeah, it was basically to deal with my late father's estate that I went into there. Yeah.
So was it Mr. Thorp that you saw?
Yeah, Mr. Thorp. Met Mr. Thorp. I think I was led through by a secretary. I can't remember a lot of the detail, but yeah, met Mr. Thorp, and he must have, I mean, at the time I was sort of probably about 32 or something like that. He seemed to be really old, you know, he seemed like he was in his 80s then. So yeah, but he seemed a nice old gentleman, yeah.
What was he like to deal with?
Very, I'd say probably Victorian in his attitude, yeah, in his manner, and he's dressed very formal. You know, you couldn't imagine the guy ever relaxing with, you know, a pair of old trousers on. You know, you'd imagine he got up in the morning, put a shirt and tie on, whether he was working or not. It was that kind of old school, you know, solicitor that you imagine existed 100 years ago.
Right. And when you were meeting with him, were you sitting at his desk or at a meeting table?
No, it was a desk, yeah, the other side of his desk, so it was all very formal.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did your meeting go?
Well, it went okay. We just basically gave him the details of what we wanted, and he said, yeah, he was quite happy to go along with it. But the interesting thing after that, because the undertaker, which was a guy called George Tiers, and he was based at Denwick, he was our undertaker, and he came to visit the family, and he said, have you got a solicitor? And I said, yeah, it's Mr. Thorp, and his face dropped, he held his head in his hands, and he said, oh God, you can't, you should go somewhere else, because the guy's, he's old, and he said he might not last long enough to to be able to sort the things out, you know, he might die in the meantime. And he really panicked, and of course he at the time he was reliant on the whole thing being taken care of to release the money, so he got paid. He wasn't going to get paid before my father's estate was sorted out, so he was really panicking. So in the end, I went to see Mr. Thorp and decided that we didn't need his services anymore, and chose another solicitor. But it was, and he did, at the time he thought that he defended me, you know, the reason that we didn't use him anymore, so he sort of was really apologetic, and yeah, I felt a bit sorry for him, you know, but it was, I think at that time there was just him working there, and everything just took so long to do, you know, and it would have probably taken it wouldn't have been settled in a few months. It could have taken, you know, over a year to do, and I don't think the undertaker fancied waiting that long for his money.
Did you have to pay him?
No, there was no payment involved because it was all very quick. I went to see him to organise, you know, him to do the work, and then within, I think it was probably the next day when we met with George Tiers, and I sort of got in touch with him straight away and said, sorry, but, you know, thank you, but no thanks. Yeah.
And which solicitor did you go to use?
We went to Adam Douglas.
Oh, right, okay.
And then because he had to, it was a little bit complicated at the time. We inherited, myself and my 4 siblings, we inherited the estate, but we decided to put it in trust and keep it, which when you put things in trust, you can't have, at the time you couldn't have 5 trustees, you could have three named trustees. I think it was 3 or 4, and then they hold it in trust for 5 of you, but you couldn't have, I think it was 3 actually signatories that you had. You couldn't have all 5, so it was a little bit complicated, but yeah, we got there in the end. Adam Douglas were really good. I've used them since, and they've been okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good. So the offices for Mr. Thorp closed.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s.
Yeah.
What do you think about the building now, and what would you like to see it as?
Well, I mean, I would like to see. I don't like great change happening, so I would like to see it preserved in some form.
So, can I just ask you that about the reception question again?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody rang in, how would this reception phone system work? What would you do?
Well, you would the ping pong ball would come down, and then you would know that was a member of the public, right? Well, your answered the phone obviously and said Dickson, Archer and Thorp, and then you had like a thing that used to plug to connect it to Mr. Thorp, it was just like a long thing. You just used to connect them, just a bit like the old-fashioned telephone exchanges, you know, and you used to see them using the telephones,
Yes.
just like that. But all I remember was ping pong balls that used to fly down. Because there wasn't many. There was only Mrs. Burns, Sylvia, Mr. Thorpe, and the other guy. There was only 4. That's all there was. You know? And it used to bzzz, it was like that. It was weird.
So, imagine you were stepping back into the building now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remember the smells and the sounds and what you saw? Does anything...
I can just remember it being very, very dreary. Very dreary. Didn't have very good lighting, and it was just drab. And I can just remember the big boardroom. The boardroom, I don't know, it must have had about 14 seats. But all the leather was curling up at the ends. Just like Wuthering Heights.
Right.
That's what it reminded of, Wuthering Heights.
So, because it was sort of fading.
Yeah. Was never used, you see, the boardroom was never used.
Okay, so could you just tell me a little bit about yourself and your connection to Dickson, Archer and Thorp?
Yeah, well, it goes back to about 1978 or 79, so my memory is a bit hazy, but it was such an event in my archive life at the time, going to Dickson, Archer and Thorp in Alnwick, and spending a few days there. It has stuck with me, but maybe I'm embellishing it a bit. I was in my first archive job at the Northumberland County Record Office, which was based at Melton Park in Gosforth then. And I was asked to go with a colleague to go up to the offices of the solicitors to do a little look round and see what was there. which was really very exciting. It was exciting getting out of the office, and I seem to think it was stiflingly hot, so it must have been summer. Yeah, so it's quite hazy but vivid memories at the same time.
Okay, so in your role as an archivist, so why was it that they asked you initially? Was it the firm that asked you to go down, or was it the Northumberland Archives themselves?
I don't know about that, but I know that my boss, the county archivist, Robin Gard, was very keen that we should set foot in the door and have a nosy around. So I actually think it was probably Robin Gard's doing, just to ferret out some good archives.
Okay, so see if there's anything interesting.
Yeah. So I think I maybe met, well, one either Dickson, Archer, or Thorp. I'll say Mr. Thorp, but I remember him being quite old. And I'm not sure if it was a bit of an imposition on him, us arriving. So no, the initiative was from the record office.
Okay.
I think.
So when you arrived initially at the building itself and you walked in there, so can you remember, I mean I know it's a long time ago, but your initial impressions of the place when you walked in, can you remember what you saw, heard or smelled, or any sort of memories you have as you walked into that building?
Yeah, I think it was... it all looked very old. It looked Dickensian.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Thorpe's office, he had a big desk, papers all over the place, obviously no computer in those days, bookcases, books piled high on the floor, just as you would imagine a 19th century solicitor's office might have been. And we had to go up to the top floor, and I can't remember if we were on the top floor with small windows or if we actually had to climb up a rickety sort of ladder to get into the attic. So I like to think my memory is that we were in the attic and crawling around, bumping our heads on the eaves of the roof, and very hot, very stuffy. Which really wasn't a good thing for me because I suffer from claustrophobia, and I can remember times when I just had to get out for a little bit of fresh air before I had a panic attack. So I remember it was, the building was dark and dusty and definitely from another era.
So there's that sense that you almost go back in time when you entered the building.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I think it is just the dryness of the place and the dust. We had to wear overalls, we had face masks, and we had our pencils and paper to jot down notes, and a liberal supply of dusters, which because these bundles on the shelves hadn't been looked at for maybe more than a century. They'd all gathered dust, quite dark, dirty dust, and we were brushing the surface dust off, which was a bit ridiculous because all it was doing was going up into the air. It had nowhere to escape to, so it was landing back down on us and the documents. So it was very difficult sometimes even trying to find some writing on the documents. And most of them were bundles, quite big bundles, tied with, I think it was pink tape, dirty tape, and crammed onto the shelves. Not any acid-free boxes or anything in sight. But having said that, even although they hadn't actually been cared for, archivally speaking, they had survived intact, which is something. So Yes, I think after about an hour I was longing for a coffee break and then a lunch break. And then it was lovely at the end of the day to get out in fresh air. And then a few weeks later it all happened again.
So, do you remember any particular meetings there?
The thing that struck me about meeting there was it was very Dickensian. Mr. Thorp's office was large, and he sat behind a large, very large desk, and there seemed to be piles of books and files either side of him on the desk. And it was a dark room, and it seemed to be, it took a while before we could get an interview with Mr. Thorp. From us asking for an interview, it took a while before he decided to organise a meeting.
And you knew him as Mr. Thorp, and you called him Mr. Thorp, is that right?
We called him Mr. Thorp when we were there, but we knew him as Reggie Thorp as well. But we didn't call him Reggie to his face.
Can you describe the officers? Who else was there, for instance?
There seemed to be, when we walked in, a lady receptionist, typist, and perhaps another lady typing as well. And we were asked to sit in the reception area and wait for Mr. Thorp to come out and invite us into his office.
So there was no waiting room as such?
I don't remember it being a waiting room. It seemed to be part of the same corridor that we sat in.
Right.
Mm.
And can you describe Mr. Thorp, please?
Small, thin, a slight hunch to his back, very particular what he said, very quiet, very slow talking. He had sort of very little hair on his head, but he was very polite to us.
Geoffrey Ward Ridley.
You are a retired solicitor, I believe.
I am a retired solicitor.
And when did you qualify?
I qualified in 1962.
Is that when you went to work for Dickson, Archer and Thorp?
Yes, that was my first employment as a solicitor.
And what sort of work were you doing?
General conveyancing, litigation in the magistrates' court, litigation in the county court, probate. I think that probably sums it up.
And how long did you stay at that firm?
I stayed there until the autumn of 1963.
Were you still doing the same work when you left?
Yes, very much the same.
Who else was working there at that time?
It was Reg Thorp, who was the senior partner and only partner, and me. I was the only other qualified person.
And was there a managing clerk or any other clerks for that matter?
No, there was a cashier, Mrs. Burns, who did all the accounting work, and we had accountants came in about every 3 months and did the accounts, kept up to date. Everything was written longhand at that time.
And were there any interesting practices going on in the building?
I don't know what you mean by practices.
I was thinking about the letterbooks.
Oh, yes. The interesting facets was, first of all, the internal communication. There was a voice tube, which ran from the back of the premises through the upstairs It was never used in my lifetime, but it was there in existence. The other thing that was unusual was that instead of carbon copies, they had letter books, whereby the letter was typed up with a purple sort of ink, and at the end of the day, they were rolled off onto rice paper, which became the letter book, no carbon copies. Subsequently, after a while, because the equipment was very old, and the staff, the young woman, did not like it, because the ink got everywhere. And so I suggested to him that we just dispense with the letter books and have carbon copies. Somewhat reluctantly, he agreed, and that seemed fine, till about a month later, I discovered that what had happened was the letter books were being kept, as were carbon copies. Mr. Thorp was a small man in his mid-40s, very short-sighted, very intelligent man, very pleasant to work for on a personal level. His filing system was somewhat haphazard, and there were some eccentricities about filing in the office. Mr. Thorp had a big room at the back, which was the library, the fireplace, and he was a small man, aged 46, very pleasant to talk to. And I was in his room one day, and I asked him to explain to me his filing system, which I had not mastered. And he pointed to the files on his desk, which were numerous, and said, "Current." And I said, "Well, what about the files down the chaise longue?" "Pending." And there were, on either side of the fireplace, there were alcoves hung with a blackout material, behind which were files. I said, "And what there?" "LBW." I said, "What does LBW mean, Mr. Thorpe?" "Let them wait."
What can you say about the clients of the firm?
The clients of the firm were by and large middle-class people who lived in Alnwick. Because the firm acted for the Duke, they couldn't act for any of the purchasers of houses. The whole of Alnwick actually was ducal, but they were selling it off bit by bit. Socially, he was very much a gentleman farmer. He was a lawyer, and people liked him. He had a good sense of humour. And very recently, I went into Lloyd's Bank in Hexham, and the subject of Reg Thorpe came up with the girl behind the counter, and she said yes, she had met Mr. Thorpe, and he came in, and he said, "I'm Reginald William Tudor Thorpe of Longevity, and I am a solicitor." Now, that was his identification. He couldn't provide a driving license or a passport. It was accepted.
And as a solicitor, you would be able to swear documents. You would have the powers of a commissioner for oaths.
Yes, that's correct.
And in that connection, I think you had something to do with Mr. Thorpe of Dickson, Archer and Thorp.
Yes, that's right. So, sometimes when you have clients, you have to get them to swear a document, and as their solicitor, you can't do that. You have to get another solicitor to carry out that function. So usually solicitors will simply send their clients off to another firm to do that. But Mr. Thorpe was a little bit different, and he liked to send out for solicitors to come down to his office to do the swearings for his clients. And that's really how I came to know Mr. Thorpe.
What are your recollections of their offices?
Yeah, so the offices were absolutely fascinating. I can remember very clearly, going in and being greeted by his secretary, who was a lovely lady called Hazel. And I always remember being quite fascinated because it was either a manual or an electric typewriter. It certainly wasn't a computer, which was, was the norm by then. So she was always, sitting typing away at this sort of, manual or electric typewriter. And she would take me upstairs to Mr. Thorpe's office, and I just remember it being this sort of enormous, very sort of dark and dusty space. The best way I can describe it is Dickensian. There were sort of rows and rows, shelves of dusty law books, and sort of deeds and files tied up with pink legal tape. And Mr. Thorpe always sat behind this massive desk right in the middle of the room, and he always looked so small behind the desk and in this enormous room. But yeah, it was absolutely fascinating to, a young lawyer. I'd never seen anything like that before, and as I say, the best way I can describe it was Dickensian.